Jay Runer here, and today we're going to be looking at transmissions. Now, there's a few things that I'm going to go over that I have done in previous testing in Forza 6. Still works the same, so it'll be the reason why I'm setting the transmission up in the first place. It might look a little strange, but I'll link those below so you can watch those and see what I'm talking about. So, the first thing you want to do when tuning your transmission is that you want to go into free play and you want to test drive on a track that has a long straightaway on it. I use the Mulsanne Straight, 24-hour Le Mans. So first thing I do before I even launch the car from a standing point is that I'll drop my final gear all the way down to 220. And like I said, the video that I'll leave links below will explain why I'm doing that. Max out all the gears over to one side and take a group of them and move them all the way to about that red line, the end of that red line at the bottom left corner screen, which will pretty much be your maximum speed, but isn't totally accurate to that. Now, you don't want to go too far because when tuning first gear, you might need a little bit. So move it back just a little bit from the end of that red line. So then I go to first gear and I look at my 0 to 60. Right now we're at 6.13, and I'll move it down about 10 points and see what that does. And that moves it down quite significantly. So I'll move it down several more points until I get the lowest 0 to 60. Now this will also set up your first gear for your launch. Let's see. And sometimes the numbers will go up and down, but you got to keep on going down to about, I'd say around the 4 point range is when it starts improving the most. Going into the 300s isn't a bad thing. Let's see. Yeah, keep on getting improvement. As you still get improvement, you just keep on looking at it. And how I set up my gears after I figure out the first gear, I'll explain that also, and then how to figure out the gear ratio from there. All right, so we're getting great improvement as we get down into the threes. So the goal is that you want to beat your original 0 to 60. And it looks like we are not getting improvement anymore, so we'll go back. And we'll start looking at where we do get the best improvement. And then we'll just fine tune it from there. Let's see. 7.4 and 5.5. Let's see what 7.5 looks like. Okay. All right. Still getting improvement. Still getting improvement. And going a half a step and 10 points is generally how I fine tune it. Okay, so looks like we are at the max. Okay. And in cars with less power, you might have to split the gear. And what I mean by that, lower powered cars, maybe 300 horsepower. It all depends on the torque band, though. Some cars can do it with one gear, some can't. For your launch, you'll keep this first gear slider all the way to the left, and you'll figure out your 0 to 60 with the second gear, and then you'll move the first slider. I don't have an example of that since we do have a high-powered car, but if you do want to tune a transmission for a car with less power, you can do it that way. So, got the first gear set up. Going to apply that. Then we're going to go into our test drive and launch the car and see how well it launches. And this is how I get my launches, where you just full throttle launch, don't have to worry about nothing. So we're rev banging right now. So what you want to look at is your telemetry by pushing down on the D-pad. It looks like at rev limiter, the torque is 400, and now we need to figure out our maximum torque, which I think in this car it's 650 or something of that sort. There's a couple of ways you can figure that out. You can look in your garage through the stats for your torque, or you can do what I'm doing and put it in higher gear. All right, so it's looking like 650, just like the Corvette that I just tuned for the S-Class hopper. I was building this car for the A-Class hopper, but then they switched it up. So I guess if they ever bring it back, you'll still have a pretty good, strong A-Class car. All right, yeah, 650 is the maximum torque. 400 is that rev limiter. So what you're going to do is you're going to take that 650 minus 400, and that would be your maximum torque, or your torque band from top to bottom. So that gives us 250 as our torque band, and then I times it by 25%, or 0.25. You can times that by any number you want, 0.30 or 0.3, 0.35, 0.2. Experiment with it, but I found that 25% off the full torque, it seems to work very well. So once you get that, times that by a quarter, you get 62.5, and you're going to minus that off your maximum torque, which is 650, and that'll be 587.5. Now, why is that important? Is when you're switching gears, I want my gears to come out when I switch to gears around that number in torque. Like, I don't want to hit maximum torque, because you don't really get that much of much of an advantage by using maximum torque for each gear, which that's in my previous videos in Forza 6, where I tested short versus long gears, and long gears was representative of the maximum torque. So what I'm going to do is take this up to about that, and I'm going to eyeball it, 2.8 for the second gear, and say okay. Then I'm going to test it. And take off, hit the rev limiter, and then shift gears, and watch where the torque turns out. So that turned out about 580, 590, which that's where you want it to be. That was perfect. So once you get it around that torque range that you just did this little bit of math with, you want to do that to each gear. Each gear you want it to turn out every gear about that torque range. So, and once you get to third gear, to that amount of torque, each gear can be lined up from the very bottom of it all the way across, and you'll get that same amount of torque range. So let's see if I got that right. So going into third gear, okay, we hit about 590 or so. So that was really close. Doesn't have to be perfect, because what is a few points of torque going to do? It's just use it as a guide. It's not so much as a definite. So I can take the rest of the gears and I can line it up with the bottom of the other one, and that would be pretty much all you need to do. This looks like it's going to be a 5-gear car, which there's nothing wrong with that. 5-gear car, 6-gear car, it doesn't matter. Because if you want to use all 6 gears, you're going to have to, multiply it by more percentage. You want to use less torque per maximum torque per gear, or torque range. So right now I'm figuring out my maximum speed, which looks like a 190 or maybe 195. We'll see. Chevy motors are a little weird, so that looks like that's going to be right about there. So once you got that all figured out, you got it set in place, test it, see if you like it. If not, you can multiply that your torque range by whatever number that you feel you want to, and then you can test it. And that's pretty much it for transmissions. This has been Jay Ruder. Like, subscribe, and thanks for watching.